You'll see companies trying to chase that shiny object, trying to chase that hidden golden place where all the data is perfect. And to be honest, that's never going to happen, whichever CDP you choose. Of course, you're encrypting email addresses, first name, addresses, any kind of information that you have, and then sending it to Facebook, but they can decrypt it. They need to do that because they need to match it on their systems. This doesn't necessarily help the user directly, but using a CDP, you as a company can determine which of those values you're sharing with Meta.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs, and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, today we have one of these episodes that fall very clearly on the marketing technology side. Not so much from a deeply technical perspective, but rather from a business point of view. In this regard, we follow on the steps of our recent interviews with Jonathan Mendes from Neuralift and Tejas Manohar from High Touch. Both of those discussed the notion of the CDP, or Customer Data Platform, besides debating how to best use first-party data. So once again, as I have also said, when dealing with, for example, the advertising industry, these topics are essential at the intersection of marketing, data, privacy, and technology that we aim to cover. I hope not to disappoint hardcore data protection experts, but we'll put aside the discussion about, of course, legal basis, data transfers, data processing agreements, or liability issues resulting from using these technologies. We will instead try to better understand the interplay between data collection pixels, first-party data, customer loyalty programs, and, for example, social media campaigns. This clarifies the resulting data flows and the safeguards available at different stages, but also, I believe, this gives us an unbeatable opportunity to understand where the market is going, so that we can anticipate the solutions of the future from a customer-centric or human-centric point of view, whether for e-commerce, digital content, or even advertising. With all this said, a few things have happened recently that make the topic even more relevant. On the enforcement side, there's been a few private lawsuits or class actions involving CDPs, again, customer data platforms. Specifically, IBM was sued, yet again, 2 months ago in November for sharing data about visitors of the Weather Channel videos and websites with a few partners, including mParticle, which is a CDP. And Peacock, which is NBC's streaming app, was subject to a class action lawsuit in 2023 for letting third parties secretly, as they said, collect the viewing history of its users. Specifically naming Adobe and again mParticle. Even more concerning, we had already covered in our newsroom, in the summer, a class action lawsuit filed in California against Segment, which is now Twilio, right? It was acquired by Twilio. And this was, the reason for this was that it was embedded in hundreds of mobile apps through the inclusion of its SDK, or Software Development Kit. The plaintiffs alleged that proper consent was never gathered. So, in case you were wondering, the consent debate is closely tied to the future of this technology on both sides of the pond. Now, on the market development side, we've also witnessed three important acquisitions in the past few weeks. Action IQ was acquired by Unifor, Lytix was acquired by Content Stack, and mParticle was acquired by Rocket last week. In all three cases, a thesis seems to be gaining ground that CDPs are great complements to very specific use cases rather than an essential piece of do-it-all middleware. Anyhow, for all those reasons, I'm very glad to have had the chance to reconnect with Matthew Niederberger after many years. Matthew is a seasoned MarTech consultant with years of experience helping global organizations unlock the full potential of their marketing technology investments or stacks. He is the founder of MarTech Therapy. And beyond consulting, he shares his knowledge through his podcast and short form videos, making complex topics accessible and engaging, as you will see for yourselves. Let's go for it. Matthew, thanks for coming.
It's been a long time coming, Sergio. We haven't spoken to you in a
Yes.
long time, but it's good to be back with you and definitely here on the show.
Likewise. Yes, it's really good to see you. Yes, yes. So CDPs. Okay.
Yeah,
I also thought they were going to be all the rage back in 2016. How is your perception of the evolution of them? Are we at a much more mature point in the market, in how companies adopt them, in how they use them? What's your perception of how useful they've been?
I still think that technology is outpacing adoption. By the time new technology arrives, you have a bunch of early adopters with technology and also in the CDP space. And you'll see companies trying to chase that shiny object, trying to chase that hidden golden place where all the data is perfect. And to be honest, that's never going to happen, whichever CDP you choose. It's always going to be a challenge. But in terms of adoption, on a recent CDP Institute survey, we do see that in the B2C space, CDP deployments are reducing. But it's interesting to see that B2B and B2B2C are actually rising, and they'll probably be outpacing B2C this year. It's going to be tricky because a lot of the CDP platforms were mainly developed around B2C companies. So when I say interesting, it's going to be, we'll have to see what these vendors do to change or make available B2B options on the same platform. But having said that, as you might have seen, mergers and acquisitions are taking place in the CDP space right now. Uniform acquired Action IQ, and I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, Content Stack acquired Lytix, and
True.
and yeah, and there's some interesting thoughts going on around that. But I think the bottom line is that the technology is interesting. According to Dylan Fly from Simon Data, he said there's over 160 CDP vendors in the market today. So it's not strange to think that a lot of these vendors want to be purchased. They want to be acquired because the competition is too hard, but they still have a strong technological underlying infrastructure ready for use for any company who wants to adopt it. I like the Content Stack and Lytix merger. As I stated in a talk with someone recently, being able to do what Lytix had developed with their XCDPs and their plugin for WordPress and Drupal. One of the biggest challenges I've always seen with implementations is actually getting that content into the front end, or actually the personalization part, the profile information, and being able to build an engine around what content to show in the front end has been the most challenging. And their solution, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that develops in 2025.
So, how did this start, right? The way we saw them start, we wanted to have a more clear picture around identity. And so I want to hear your perspective, because the way I lived through this is we had analytics and we were looking at the end purpose, activating data, because we thought when we use analytics as a starting point, you've got two avenues. One of them is your decision making, right? How are you going to be sharing insights, making decisions? In that space, real time is not so useful because you want, the more crucial the decisions, the more long term they have to be, the bigger impact, right? You need to talk to people. So, but in the short distance, wherever you do not need to go through the decision, through the minds of those that need to I don't know, fire 20 people or hire a new team, right?
Yeah.
Then data can act directly. And so we thought, why do we need to decide and build a new dashboard and a new report and talk about it when data in itself is actionable in a way that it can already trigger a switch or a new target in the campaign, or personalizing content on a website. So there were those two things that I remember we talked about back, in the Stone Ages. So one of them was, let's activate this data that we now have, we've been collecting through analytics in the campaigns, so for a demand generation or whatever, and let's activate that through our digital properties so that everything is more relevant. So there were those cases, but the problem with that sort of starting point is that we had everybody sort of saying they were a CDP because it would give shelter to a million things. So when did this finally become something more narrow and clearly defined?
I think it became, well, to kind of go back, like you said, to Stone Ages. I think I like to call it the Wild West because everyone was doing everything all at once. I remember doing analytics implementations. There wasn't even a discussion about what were you going to track and what was the purpose of the data points that you were tracking. It was implement it, track everything, and then afterwards we'll sort out the data that we need. And as time progressed, as you say, we started with activation, and I love it that you talk about that because when we started with analytics, it was very passive. We were just seeing what people were doing on the website, building reports on it, but we couldn't really take action on it. One of the books that really got me thinking about the action we needed to take was a book from Sean Power and Alistair Kroll called Complete Web Monitoring. And in it, they kind of talked, or they illustrated was the word, because they used a lot of a lot of graphs at the time. I mean, this book is, I believe, 12 years old right now, so it's also very ahead of its time. And what they did was show you how to combine quantitative data that you were collecting, so behavioral data, with qualitative data, feedback, getting from feedback surveys, what people are saying, through social listening, et cetera, and then being able to paint a full picture of what's actually motivating these users. Now, it's not the state that we're in now. That by itself doesn't define a CDP, but it does go to show that quantitative data by itself was just not enough. So we started collecting more, but we also started storing more on these users and being able to use that data to actually build out these audiences. And the technology that the CDP actually offers, if you look at what mParticles, Michael Katz defines as the CDP 1.0, is now highly commodified. A CDP or any tool that can be called a CDP needs to collect data, and needs to be able to build profiles, needs to be able to clean data, and needs to be able to build audiences, and then also sync that data back to advertising platforms or any API endpoint destination of your choice, or even databases. So once you're able to build out those profiles and actually gain value out of them by synchronizing those lists that you built out of your profiles to these ad platforms, I think that's where the real value came from. To say that that's going to be the same case in 5 years, I think we'll be well beyond that, as you might see now. And I think a lot has been discussed by some very high level thought leaders in the market. Is that your Scott Brinker, for example, from Chief MarTech Finansieringma over at Growth Tribe. You're seeing the consolidation of the market right now. All these, there are too many tools. There's no differentiation between these tools, but the underlying engines, they can be interesting for specific niches. So like you see with Content Stack, and I don't know too much about them, but I think they're comparable to what Commerce Tools does for e-commerce websites. They're kind of a headless content management system, I believe.
Yeah, that's what they described. They said headless CMS on their website.
Oh, okay, yeah, and but they didn't have the capabilities of doing the profile unifications or the profile unifications and being able to deliver personalized content in real time. They were working on it, but what's easier? I mean, the picking's right now in the CDP market. Just go buy one of these CDP vendors and integrate it into the solution. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you had all of these angles. So, for example, Lytics, I think they were very focused on real time. So you're collecting all this data and then being able to activate that very quickly. Then you had people that came from the tag management world. If you remember, Tilium at some point started calling itself a CDP before it
Yeah.
was called a first party DMP in the early days and other things. And then you had people coming from mobile, yes, like mParticle came
Yeah.
from or cross platform when mobile side being really big and you had to collect data across apps and websites and so on. So people come from so many different places. And when Action IQ came along, I was in New York back then, and they were presenting at this data-driven New York City event,
Oh, wow.
the tech stack. So their CTO, he seemed pretty sharp to me. He was presenting how they were solving a technical problem at the sort of data storage level, and I thought, okay, this is a CDP for me now. And then over the years, then I saw something else coming along, and I thought, where's the value now? Because then databases made a lot of progress. And so we had another interview with Tejas Manohar, the CEO of HighTouch,
Yeah.
and they call themselves a composable
Composable.
CDP now.
Yeah.
So you've got then the value switching to another layer because all of a sudden people like Snowflake were solving that data problem. And so then I thought, okay, then what's the value? Where is the value now for an Action IQ who had solved that difficult challenge? Is it that maybe it wasn't them, it was the natural evolution of databases that solved it, and then everything they did became commoditized? And so if the value is now sitting on top on activation on the APIs that plug into either the content platforms or the marketing channels, then that is open standard. So where is the value now? And so I really wanted to ask you, because the market has been playing with these things and being quite frustrated for a time, right? So I'm sure you've seen a lot of people starting with the wrong data or the wrong data collection strategy. What has worked from your point of view in the light of this evolution, right? So the data layer and then the activation layer, which things have you seen succeed over the years?
The things that I've seen succeed is, strangely enough, not the product itself. It's the people. And just to give an example, I recently rounded up a project with an American company, and to my surprise, the at the time that I started, they had assembled an entire team to pick up this project. And that by itself is nothing new. But when you look at the structure of the team, you had a back-end developer, you had a front-end developer, there was a data scientist, there was somebody from data management, there was a data engineer. The team was filled with different roles. And because of this, we were able to pick up the topic very quickly, make sure to identify tasks and assign them to the right talents, the right skills within the team, and move along as quickly as possible. It was a multidisciplinary approach. And one thing that I've learned in my 20-year career in analytics now, and I learned it very late, and it's something that a good friend of mine kind of rubbed my nose in it at one point. It's not the tools. Definitely today. Like I said, according to some estimates, there are 160 CDPs in the market. I don't think we'll be able to tell the difference between most of them if we were to do a kind of a Coca-Cola, Pepsi taste test with CDPs. I believe it was segment.com. They came up with the Analytics JS SDK for tracking, collecting all the data from a client-side browser. Rudderstacks cloned it, built, edited it, changed it for themselves, committed it, and that's what they're running. There are so many of these solutions out there running on that Analytics.js clone, or actually, a copy of it, that in the end, it's all the same. So if you say to me, you know, if we go back to the original question, it's the people that really should be making the difference, and I think that's where the challenge should lie. Because if you educate your team properly, they'll be able to identify the proper tool that they need to use within their architecture, with their data structure, and being on masters of privacy, also be something that works within their local or regional or national or international regulations. So it's definitely not the tools, and I think it'll have an effect in the market. Well, we're seeing that effect. They're being bought left and right because, yeah, what's the difference these days? The technology behind it, it's good, it's strong, it's proven, but yeah, there's so many to choose from. I mean, people, yeah, and I think the people who get the experience with these tools and they move and they get headhunted by another company, that company's going to benefit from them.
Okay, so we've put a lot of faith into the technology. We think the toy is going to solve it. And that's a tendency we also have, this Cartesian approach to life, where we think everything is mathematical and predictable, and humans, not just customers, as something
Yeah,
that is predictable and can be dumped into a funnel, and then we sell these toys to each other, trying to make customers predictable
yeah,
and trying to systematize everything to the extreme. But it's not just that, it's that us, as internal teams within companies, we also do not realize how very human we are. So you you onboard the team with a CDP, and the first thing they need to feel is the need for it. So that means they've reached the end. They found the limitations of the stack they had to either personalize content, for example, across digital properties, or to generate demand and personalize offers or target the right audience. So I understand. So it fits very nicely with this logic of the first party data that everyone is, has been advocating for a few years, also because of privacy compliance.
yeah.
So if I want to now run campaigns more efficiently, where Amazon will tell me if they're selling me even their data clean room offering, their Amazon Prime TV slots, they're asking advertisers to supply some first party data to make it more relevant so they can find lookalike audiences and so on. But they're still enticing you to collect as much first party data as possible, even though it doesn't come natural to you. So to pull from that, right, and get to the CDP, right? So you've got all of these companies, and they could be B2B, they could be B2C, but they're in this process where they're trying to amass as much first-party data as possible. And thanks to the CDP, the world of analytics and events is marrying the world of the CRM and structure, right? So now you've got these graphs that have this single view, let's say, of, I don't know, of the customer, a single view of the visitor, a single view of the audience, and so that, have we accomplished that bit? So on the data collection, if we start going up on this pyramid, you've got data collection layer. So are we already able to marry that email address when we collect it, which is structured and simple, with all of those events through the CDP? Do you see that already working seamlessly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the core features. And if it doesn't, I'd run away. I'd tear up the contract and look for something else because, like I said, it's just one of those core functionalities. The identity stitching, identity unification, whatever you want to call it. It's just one of the core features, and the capabilities are there absolutely. And even if you haven't identified yourself and you have been visiting a website for 10, 20 times in the last 2 weeks, if you don't delete your cookies, which is a whole different topic on discussion, once you register, all that data that has been collected previously in all those previous sessions will be added to that identified profile. So yeah, we've definitely reached that point. And to come back to your discussion around the the value, well, you mentioned the B2B. I just wanted to come back and say, with certain some of these products that I've been seeing right now is that they've becoming very affordable. And as I was talking to someone today, the more you find yourself kind of in the and in discussions at the level of CTOs, CEOs of all these different CDPs, you're only seeing the tip of the edge of what they're working on. And my personal what I'm personally convinced of right now is that with the prices of technology lowering, of these CDPs going down, it's going to become more affordable for small and medium-sized businesses, especially the medium. And I think that's we'll kind of see a replay of everything that's happened on with enterprise companies now happening with medium-sized companies. They want to get their data in order because they've been learning, they've been seeing slowly, or they've been hiring people who've been telling them, saying, hey, you need to get your data architecture in order. You need to start finding out who your customers are, and there are ways to do that. So I feel that CDPs in some shape or form or acronym will have a long future ahead in the middle section of the market because people are willing to invest. And yeah, maybe who knows? Maybe there'll be an open source solution like what WordPress was back in the day for CMS systems. There'll be a WordPress version of a CDP in 4 to 6 years. Who knows?
So, so you've got that layer, right? So that layer is working. We've made a lot of progress. Now we
Yeah,
can do that. And there's the again the identity stitching
yeah.
and
The API
sometimes cookie
standard
history.
APIs have standardized, so connecting to any platform is pretty much comes down to the entering of an API key and determining what data you're going to sync. Yeah, it's very available at the moment.
Very good. So that's a lot, and that's an expectation we can already have on that layer. And then at the other end, at the opposite end, at the very top of the pyramid, I don't know if it's a pyramid, whatever. At the top of that sort of value structure, you've got the connection, how that data is flying out
Yeah.
to become useful. So again, in the Lytics example, how it's going to now help personalize content. How is your experience on that end, or how frustrating or how rewarding the experience of people eventually using the data on the way out?
Mixed. And I think that comes back to which product you use or the architecture that you've put into place, to be more exact. And I've come across companies who've taken time and put in effort to build their own API connections. There are solutions out there that offer them out of the box. Like I said, it's just more or less the entering of your API key, and you need to do your due diligence about the data you're passing through. But it basically comes down to adding an API key, and your data is flowing into that endpoint. To come back to the first one, though, is that if you do not actively manage or monitor the quality of your API calls and or any upcoming changes to API structures from the platform you're sending data to, you're at risk of those connections breaking. So it's definitely not as fully self-service across the board with all vendors. It's possible, but there's definitely still potential risk.
Okay, so then just to wrap it up in terms of the stack. So all of the value that used to be in the middle, because we looked at the top, at connections, at collection, and so everything in the middle, which is build these segments, massage the data, be able to do something with this data so it's smarter, so you can do your own things, build your own, go a bit farther from the things you could do with dumb queries on a Salesforce, so you can be smarter. Have you seen a lot of progress in that middle stack?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the bigger changes that I've been seeing is that you're no longer really dependent on the data that's being sent into the CDP. So, for instance, a segment I think about a year and a half ago came up with something called Profile Sync. This was at the time, like as you mentioned, with high touch. with their composable solution, the data warehouse centric approach, a data warehouse only approach, that all the data is stored in a data warehouse. I think Segment saw that storm coming. And but one of the enhancements that came out of it, which I find very beneficial for the customers, is this profile sync. So you would have all your profile data, all your use, all the events stored within your CDP, but to enrich it, maybe with some machine learning algorithms or calculations on propensity scoring, churn, for churn, abandonment, or the purchase of a specific product, or next best buy. The it's a little bit laborious to get that data properly into a CDP. So what they did is they flatten the profiles to visualize it and store it in a data warehouse, and then the data warehouse is something you control, but you can add to that. You can add extra properties to that profile. And what will happen is that all those updated profiles in the database will go back into the CDP. So outside of the CDP, you'll be able to expand on those profiles with business-specific variables that's only available offline, but you want to give it an average, you want to give it a special code, and make it available within the CDP for to help you create audiences. That's definitely doable now.
All of these APIs that a Segment, for example, took a lot of time to create, to plug into into the recipients of the data for activation, and that HighTouch is boasting of being able to plug into so many different places. They are limited to the channels where you can activate. And at this point, you've got an oligopoly of channels where every day more, the Metas, Google, Amazon, they're restricting how data can be thrown at them because they're moving to the black box model when it comes to bidding. So you send in data, for example, now through, they're asking for conversion data, which we're sending also even for analytics platforms through a conversion API. Or in Meta, now they're accepting batch uploads of some sort of first-party data-related events in terms of...
Yeah, maybe you're doing offline conversions and you need to batch upload them, yeah.
Yeah, so activating is not so simple anymore because you're not targeting specifically. You're targeting in a way that is very convoluted. It's been hidden. In many regards, in many cases, also because of privacy compliance. For example, Meta doesn't, because of the DSA, for example, in Europe, now you won't be able to fine-tune the specific properties of the audience you're targeting because some of these properties could be sensitive data categories. So now it's all hiding, it's all black box. They'll say, give me your money, tell me what you want to do. You want to sell, you're going to get leads, and I'll do it for you. So if that's the case, then the CDP is blind, isn't it?
Yes and no. And I think this stretches all the way into politics these days, about the European regulations. And, to be honest, I think as we discussed before going into the podcast, I think privacy should be a human right. You should be able to determine what happens with your data. And with Meta and Google all trying to become these black boxes, they're protecting their IP, their main form of income. Now, to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of struggles around it in the work that I've been doing. A lot of these conversion APIs, as they're often referred to, pretty much work the same. But it's just I don't feel that it's safe. Of course, you're encrypting email addresses, first name, addresses, any kind of information that you have, and then sending it to Facebook, but they can decrypt it. They need to do that because they need to match it on their system. So there's nothing safe about it. However, using a CDP, and this doesn't necessarily help the user directly, but using a CDP, you as a company can determine which of those values you're sharing with Meta. So of course they're going to say, we need the email address. We'll need a phone number of the user who did the conversion so we can match them on our system. It's going to help you increase the accuracy. But do you need to send a first name? Do you need to send their shipping address that they're using or any additional information? So using a CDP, it might be kind of, not the most watertight solution for privacy, but it does offer you the control of which parameters you're sending to a conversion API. Because, yeah, ultimately, and especially some of these more advanced CDPs, they even allow you to determine which values you can pass on based on consent. So there's definitely a lot to discuss on that part with Meta, and I think they're feeling the pressure.
So you mentioned consent. So that's a huge problem. What is your experience in how it's affected the sample sizes and the value of your data and the quality of the data if only half the audience agrees to being part of eventually a CDP?
Right? No, absolutely great question. It's definitely affected. I remember, or the data quality. I remember the night that GDPR came into effect, and I was working for a client hard that all into the evening to get Google Tag Manager ready to abide by the GDPR regulations. And it went live. I stayed up until midnight, put it live just to meet the requirements. And over the next 2 days, I think it took 2 days, maybe three, we started seeing an impact on the data that marketeers were working with. And I kid you not, the CMO at the time just called them and say, hey, undo it. Turn it back to the original state, because we are not able to properly um, uh, build performance reports of our spend with this with a lack of insights. And I mean, to his credit, it's true. It's true. But it's a sad state to be forced into a position where, GDPR needs to be realized. And how I've been over the years seeing GDPR and consent banners is a protection layer pushed by the government to protect the users from big tech. So, if the roles were different, if big tech would take more responsibility, more transparency, allow for more audits, maybe this whole thing wouldn't be necessary. But the impact is real, and attribution is a big one. ITP, deleting cookies. Um, it, I don't think there's a industry that's been impacted so much as performance marketing because of consent. Personally, I think it's necessary. The user needs to be able to determine what information is shared with them. The idea I had once is just don't show the banner immediately. Let people experience your brand, forget you missed the data. That's fine, but at some point say, hey, hopefully we've been able to build up trust in your last 3 sessions that you've been here in the last 8 days. Would you mind reconsidering giving us consent? Because it's a trust game. It's a trust. And a lot of media websites, I don't give consent because I know how many cookies are being dropped in one session. It's incredible. Your data is going everywhere.
Yeah. Matthew, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Sergio. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you again.
Thanks a lot. Okay, that's all for today. Follow us on Blue Sky, and in the Masters of Privacy Altogether profile, you will find the starter pack, which includes the feeds of all of our past guests. There is also a Masters of Privacy LinkedIn channel, which I invite you to follow, where you will find links to our transcripts, cheat sheets, and other surprises every now and then. Our main website is mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.